You're in a group and someone says, "You're so quiet." And just like that, the air shifts. You smile. Maybe you laugh a little. Maybe you say something like, "Yeah, I guess I am," and move on. But somewhere underneath that, something tight. Because the way it was said, it wasn't quite a compliment. It was an observation with a question mark behind it. A gentle nudge toward being something other than what you are. You know this moment. You've probably lived it more times than you can count. In classrooms where participation was graded and your inner world was doing most of the work. In workplaces where the loudest voice in the room was mistaken for the most capable one. In social settings where your stillness was read as distance, your thoughtfulness was read as disinterest, and your quiet was read as something that needed to be fixed. But what if it didn't? What if the silence that the world has spent years trying to talk you out of is actually one of the most psychologically sophisticated, neurologically grounded, quietly powerful ways of being a human being? That's what we're exploring today, the real psychology of quiet people, and why silence, properly understood, is not your weakness. It is your superpower. I want to tell you something I haven't always been comfortable saying out loud. I am a quiet person, not shy necessarily, though I've been called that, not antisocial, though I've been assumed to be, just genuinely, constitutionally quiet. Someone who processes internally before speaking, who prefers one deep conversation to 10 surface ones, who finds noise, social noise, stimulation noise, the constant pressure to perform presence, genuinely exhausting. And for a long time, I treated that as a problem to solve. I remember trying to be louder, more spontaneous, more immediately engaging. I watched people who seemed to move through social spaces effortlessly, people who never seemed to run out of things to say, who filled silence like it was dangerous, and I tried to learn from them, to become more like them. What I got instead was depletion, a kind of social exhaustion that didn't make sense on the surface because I hadn't done anything strenuous. I'd just spent hours being someone other than myself. It wasn't until I started understanding the actual psychology and neuroscience behind quiet, behind introversion, behind sensory processing sensitivity, behind the way certain nervous systems are simply wired to work differently, that something began to shift. I wasn't broken, I wasn't behind, I wasn't missing some social gene that everyone else had been given at birth. I was wired for depth, and depth, in a world that often chooses volume, is a rare and undervalued gift. Let's talk about what the research actually says about quiet people, because it is genuinely fascinating, and I think you deserve to hear it. What quiet actually is, and what it isn't. First, let's separate some terms that often get conflated. Introversion is not shyness. Shyness is a fear of social judgment. It's anxiety-based, and it's something many people, including extroverts, experience. Introversion, as defined by psychologist Carl Jung, who first introduced the concept, and later expanded by researchers like Dr. Susan Cain, is about where you direct your energy and attention, and crucially, where you restore it. Introverts restore through solitude and inner reflection. Extroverts restore through external stimulation and social engagement. Neither is superior, they are simply different orientations to the world. But here's what's important. Introversion and quiet often travel together, and both are profoundly influenced by something called sensory processing sensitivity, a trait identified by psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron, affecting roughly 15 to 20% of the population. Highly sensitive people, many of whom are quiet, process sensory and emotional information more deeply than the average person. They notice more, they feel more, they think more thoroughly before acting or speaking. And the research on what that produces is remarkable. Studies show that quiet, highly sensitive individuals consistently demonstrate higher levels of empathy and emotional intelligence, greater creativity and divergent thinking, more careful and accurate decision-making, and deeper, more durable long-term relationships. These are not consolation prizes. These are genuine cognitive and emotional advantages. The world just isn't always structured to reward them. What's happening in the brain? Here's where the neuroscience becomes genuinely validating. Research by psychologist Dr. Marty Olson Laney, using brain imaging studies, found measurable differences in the neural pathways of introverts and extroverts. Specifically, introverts show greater blood flow to the frontal lobes, the regions of the brain associated with planning, self-reflection, problem-solving, and internal processing. Extroverts show more activity in the pathways associated with sensory processing and external stimulation. In plain terms, the quiet person's brain is doing more internal work, more reflection, more integration, more depth of processing before output. Additionally, research on neurotransmitter responses shows that introverts are more sensitive to dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. Because their baseline sensitivity to dopamine is higher, they require less external stimulation to feel satisfied. Quiet evening, a meaningful conversation, a creative project. These provide genuine neurological reward that doesn't require volume or crowd. Extroverts, by contrast, need more stimulation to feel the same reward, hence the drive toward social activity and external engagement. Neither is a flaw, but it does mean that what replenishes a quiet person looks very different from what replenishes a louder one. And mistaking those two different needs for the same situation is where a lot of unnecessary suffering happens. The cultural context. A world built for extrovert. Here is something worth naming clearly. We live in what author Susan Cain, whose book Quiet became a landmark in this conversation, calls the extrovert ideal. A cultural bias, particularly strong in Western cultures and especially in America, that treats sociability, assertiveness, and verbal fluency as the default markers of competence, leadership, and value. From early childhood, many quiet people received the message, often unintentionally but consistently, that their natural way of being is insufficient. Open-plan classrooms reward verbal participation. Open-plan offices reward constant visibility. Social media rewards volume and frequency of output. Job interviews reward immediate, confident articulation, even when thoughtful deliberation would produce a far better answer. Psychologist Lori Helgo, in her research on introvert culture, found that introverts make up anywhere from 30 to 50% of the population, and yet the environments most of us navigate daily were largely designed for the other half. This is not a personal failing. It is a cultural mismatch, and naming it, clearly, without resentment, is the beginning of navigating it without losing yourself to it. What quiet people know that loud ones don't. Let me offer something here that I want you to really sit with. Quiet people are, by nature, extraordinary observers. Because you spend less time filling space with words, you spend more time noticing, reading rooms, sensing what isn't being said, catching the emotional undercurrents that louder conversations miss entirely. This is not a passive skill. It is a sophisticated form of intelligence that researchers increasingly recognize as foundational to empathy, leadership, and creative problem-solving. Psychologist Adam Grant at Wharton has studied quiet leadership extensively and found that introverted leaders often outperform extroverted ones, particularly in complex environments where listening, careful decision-making, and empowering others matter more than projecting confidence. Some of history's most transformative figures, thinkers, artists, spiritual leaders, scientists, were profoundly quiet people, whose contributions came precisely from their willingness to go inward when the world was going outward. Your silence is not absence. It is presence at a different frequency, and the world, despite what it sometimes tells you, genuinely needs that frequency. So how do we stop just surviving our quietness and start inhabiting it as the genuine strength it is. Here are 4 gentle practices. 1. Stop apologizing for your processing speed. Quiet people often apologize, implicitly or explicitly, for taking time to think before they speak, for not having an instant answer, for needing to sit with something before they respond. Stop. That pause is not a malfunction. It is thoroughness. Research on decision quality consistently shows that people who deliberate longer before responding make more accurate assessments and fewer errors. Your processing speed is a feature, not a delay. A gentle practice. The next time someone asks for your input and you need a moment, instead of apologizing, simply say, "Let me think about that for a moment." No apology, no performance of instant confidence, just honest, quiet deliberation. Done with ease rather than shame, that pause communicates thoughtfulness, and thoughtfulness is compelling. 2. Design your life around restoration, not performance. Many quiet people spend enormous energy trying to perform at the pace of a world that runs on extrovert fuel. And then they collapse and wonder why they feel so depleted when they haven't done anything particularly hard. What they've done is something very hard. They've sustained a way of being that isn't natural to them for hours or days at a time without adequate restoration. A gentle practice. Begin intentionally designing restoration into your schedule, not as a reward for social performance, but as a non-negotiable requirement. Alone time, quiet time, unscheduled time with no social expectation. This isn't selfish. This is maintenance. And a well-restored, quiet person brings gifts to their relationships and work that a depleted one simply cannot access. 3. Find and protect your deep conversations. Quiet people don't dislike people. They dislike shallow interaction that costs energy without creating connection. The small talk, the surface, the performance of sociality without actual contact. What quiet people genuinely thrive in, and what research on introvert well-being consistently identifies as their primary social need, is depth of connection, not breadth of it. 1 or 2 relationships of real depth will sustain a quiet person far more than a wide social network of surface connections. A gentle practice. Be intentional about finding the people and spaces where you don't have to translate yourself, where depth is welcome, where silence in conversation doesn't feel like failure. These relationships exist, and protecting them, tending to them with the same care you bring to everything, is one of the most important things a quiet person can do for their well-being. 4. Reframe your silence as contribution. In group settings, quiet people often feel invisible, or worse, feel that their quietness is being interpreted as disengagement or lack of ideas. And sometimes other people do misread it that way. The reframe. Your silence in a room is not absence. It is active listening, active observing, active integrating, all of which are forms of contribution that the room needs but rarely acknowledges. A gentle practice. When you do speak, speak with confidence in the weight of what you've been quietly building. You have been watching. You have been thinking. What you offer when you finally offer it carries the density of real observation. Lead with that, not with an apology, not with, "I'm not sure if this is right," but with the quiet confidence of someone who has taken the time to actually think. Your words, when they come, are worth the wait. Let them arrive without apology. I want to stay here with you for just a moment before we close. If you have spent years feeling like your quietness was something the world needed you to fix, I want you to hear this clearly and gently. You were never broken. You were never behind. You were never too much in your head or too little in the room. You were processing. You were observing. You were going deep in a world that was going wide. And that is not a consolation prize for failing to be loud. That is a genuine, neurologically grounded, psychologically validated way of being fully, beautifully human. There's a verse that has quietly meant a great deal to me personally. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know. Just those 4 words. Be still and know. Not be still and wait to be useful. Not be still until you figure out how to be louder. Be still, and in that stillness, know. As if the knowing itself is what the stillness makes possible. I think quiet people have always understood something about that. That stillness is not emptiness. It is a different kind of fullness. And the world, in its noise and its speed, often forgets that it needs people who remember how to be still. And now, the question I'd love to bring to this community. Are you a quiet person? What's the biggest misconception people have about you? Let me know below. This is one of the most thoughtful, honest communities I know, and I have a feeling the comments on this one are going to be something really special. Take your time. Say what's true. Your words are worth the wait. They always have been. We started today in that familiar moment, someone saying, "You're so quiet," and the air shifting, the smile, the small apology dressed up as self-deprecation. Maybe that moment feels a little different now. Maybe the quietness that you've been quietly managing, accommodating, shrinking, explaining, is beginning to look a little more like what it actually is. A superpower. Patient, deep, observant, steady. A frequency the world needs and doesn't always know how to ask for. You don't have to be loud to matter. You don't have to fill every silence to be present. You don't have to become someone easier to read to be someone worth knowing. You just have to be, quietly, fully, unapologetically, yourself. Thank you for being here today. If this video said something you've needed to hear, please like it and subscribe to Soul Spa HQ. It helps this gentle space find more people who need it. And if you know a quiet person in your life who has spent too long apologizing for their silence, share this with them. It might be the permission they didn't know they were waiting for. More conversations like this one are here for you, on identity, on anxiety, on the quiet struggles that don't always have words yet. Your silence was never the problem, and you are always welcome here. Thank you, and I am grateful for you being you.